This is the mother lode of information. It contains the research and the detailed facts that support the thesis that's presented in this analysis here. And because it's called a set, it has the same Library of Congress number. They go together. And then I have another little thing here, a little bit lighter reading for small children. This is my first book, it's ABC Zoo, which is a book of illustrated capitals and watercolors and clever rhymes.
That's wonderful.
And this is very good for, we're very big on child literacy and preschool education, homeschooling. It's very good to, of course, read to your children from the very earliest age, and it's extremely important for them. So I'm selling these books to help me to continue on to the next part of my tour. This is a kind of a self-funded tour. I don't work for anybody. I came here from Sweden. Because I get a lot of energy out of meeting people who are interested in 9/11 truth and pushing air into the local communities that are interested in it. And all that's required for these events to happen is one concerned, active person like Henry, who either finds a place to have an event or in a public library. I just came off from Florida. I had 6 stops in Florida, and each one was in a public library. And this is what our freedom of speech was meant to be, that we exercise in our freedom of speech about important issues of the day. And we're lucky we can still do that in this country. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'll take some questions.
I've got a question. Firstly, your sort of hypothesis is that explosives are put in these buildings. Well, that adds a lot of risk to the operation. We're not able to account for Building 7's collapse, but it seems like most of the objectives could be achieved just by flying the planes in. So, why was it so essential that the buildings had explosives in them?
Well, that's a very good question. Because a plane flew into the Empire State Building back in 1949, and it just crashed into it and sat there. It fell out. The buildings would not have fallen with just the plane attack itself. You would have had a crumpled up floor, and the towers would have still stood. And as we know, there's such towers. These towers were way, way overbuilt. They, much cheaper, less strong structures have burned intensely, like the Windsor Tower down in Spain, burned for 24 hours like a torch. Nothing collapsed. A little bit of damage at the top. Such steel frame buildings have never collapsed due to fire. And they would come down. In order to get the spectacle and to kill the people and then to destroy the evidence, you had to destroy the whole thing. So it's very similar to the bombing of the King David Hotel. Is that this? As I said, this is a crime within a crime within a crime, like a Russian Matryoshka doll. And there was, as I said, there was a heist that happened the night before. Evidence in gold. We know that gold was being moved around one of those buildings. One convoy got stuck between the 2 buildings, 4 and 5. Evidence was being destroyed, but there was a whole agenda, a whole host of crimes and agenda that were trying to be accomplished. In order to do that, they had to have a complete destruction. They foresaw they needed to have a complete destruction. But the fact that such complete destruction could not have happened without evidence, without explosives, is ignored by the media. The media and the government are guilty of having lied to us for 14 years. That's basically why.
It's basically, just to create more of a spectacle and to destroy evidence. They took the extra risk of putting explosives in.
Well, it was. They saw it. I think they probably saw it as minimizing risk, because had they not completely destroyed the World Trade Center, you would have evidence. There would be pieces of the airplane would be more expected to be found. But what they did, for example, when they did find fragments of aircraft, they were treated as garbage. They were taken to the Fresh Kills dump, and then all of that steel that was there was destroyed 24/7. It was taken to 2 junkyards in New Jersey, where it was cut up into pieces 5 feet and shorter, and mixed with other scrap, and sent to Asia. And that whole part of the destruction of the evidence is a crime. They try to make a legal distinction that this was an act of war, therefore just clean up the mess and get on with life. No, it was a crime. Another question?
So,
Yes.
A little more about the gold. I was always curious about the thievery. I thought there was a grand larceny occurred. Not based on any fact, I just made the presumption that if someone's going through all this to have this, that there had to be some diversion, right? Of theft.
You said
What,
gold.
what type of magnitude of value do you think existed prior to? Do you have any knowledge
About the amount of gold?
Yeah,
Oh,
gold,
a lot of gold.
whatever value. I don't know.
There was a lot of gold, and we don't know the exact amount. I mean, but lots and lots of gold was down there. But also there was a great deal of criminal evidence of crimes that were worth billions and billions of dollars, like the Enron scandal. And all of that evidence was destroyed, taken away. And it was taken away, at 3 o'clock in the morning the night before. And so that is in itself a crime. But what we're now in a position where we, the American people, are seeking clarity on this event and prosecution of the guilty. But how do you prosecute the highest law enforcement officer in the country? How do you prosecute the executive branch of government? That's very difficult.
Right.
Another question in the back, sir?
Could you go over maybe some of the history of the United States and the pretext for the wars, false flags? I don't know if people that might not understand this, theater might understand it more. We talk about Operation Northwood and different things that pattern that follows a similar pattern to get us in the wars.
And Gulf of Tonkin.
Oh, yeah.
Follow on from the Kennedy, and then the Liberty, of course, which everybody has to understand.
Yeah. True. Well, that's the thing is that many of the wars that America has fought in the past have been wars in which false flag terrorism was used. The sinking of the Maine in 1898, I think it was, the Lusitania, Pearl Harbor. Well, Pearl Harbor was a real attack, although we had awareness of it pending attack. The Gulf of Tonkin was basically a non-event, but it was exploited to usher in the escalation of the war in Vietnam. It's how they do it. But in this case, when people talk about 9/11 being an inside job, I balk, because it's not an inside job. Well, it's inside in the same way that a parasite is inside you. The parasite, though, is not you. The parasite is a foreign entity within you, which is basically what it is with these dual nationals and these Zionists in American government. Wolfowitz, Zachheim, the whole crew. They have a foreign agenda. They are beholden to and loyal to a foreign state, Israel. And yet they are making decisions about this country going to war or not. And that is unusual in our history. We were kind of like the Rothschilds were involved in getting us into World War I and involved in getting us into World War II. But 9/11 and the foreign involvement and the fact that we are now fighting a war for a foreign country that is destroying our country is why it's so important to understand the false flag aspect of it and the fact that it's a fraud. And that the fraud is basically an Israeli fraud. It's a Rothschild/Israeli fraud. The Rothschilds are like the mothership of the state of Israel. Israel is like the battering ram or the operational arm of international Zionism. International Zionism does not begin and end with Israel. Israel could cease to exist tomorrow, but you would still have the Zionists residing in the city of London. So and other parts of the world. But what I hope, I don't want to offend anybody, but I hope that we can undeceive ourselves about this relationship with Israel and realize that our relationship with the state of Israel is an unholy alliance. And that Israel is in fact a danger and a threat to the Jewish people more than it is to non-Jewish people. It's a grave threat to Jewish people in this country and other countries. So it's like the hoax, the deception has to be exposed. And when it's exposed, you defang the beast. You're no longer afraid of that ghost in the closet. But as long as people are believing that the whole Islamic world wants to come and kill us all, and that we have to fight this war on terror, we're living in fear. And most of the population of this country is living in fear because they don't understand what the war on terrorism is. It's a fraud. I wrote a recent article about the Wizard of Oz and how Toto the little dog Toto just pulled the curtain to the side, and then everybody was healed. They were healed of their ills when they realized that the whole thing was a deception. That's the same place we are today. It's all a deception. Our government is part of it. We're being righteously screwed out of our national wealth, and people are being killed. We've lost our sense of innocence. We're going to the airports. We're treated like we're suspects in a crime at any airport in this country. They've taken all the fun out of life, and they've taken the smile off most of our faces, and they've taken the money out of our pockets. Well, we can't go on like this. Because if it continues like this, they will take us to war with Iran. They will take us to war with Russia. And it's all based on deception. And we have, nobody's gonna save this country but ourselves. The Iranians won't save us. The Swedes won't save us. We have to save ourselves. It's a matter of us participating in our democratic republic like we're members. Yes, sir.
And not to jump ahead to the ultimate question,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to jump ahead to the ultimate question is, given the understanding of the magnitude of the deception and the crime and how that's just the most recent crime, or I'll use the word hoax because that's exactly what the biggest one of all is as well. How can a realization ever occur when the normalcy bias and people's attention is so utterly controlled by all of the institutions? And B, even if it were to become understood, how can there be any redress that isn't a bloody catastrophe in retribution? How do we even look, how do we pray and think and talk to each other about how to deal with this truth, how to deal with it if it is exposed? Or does this almost inevitably mean that the asset stripping will continue until they pull the plug at the biggest level because they can't let it become exposed? And there's the EMP, or there's the designer plague, or there's the combination of that and the market finally imploding. If I may, can you talk about how you see forward from these facts? Maybe those of you who don't know as much about or believe that it occurred yet, I'm, I guess, skipping past that, but this is what really is the question in my mind.
Well, I think that we have been deceived for a long time. America, the whole world, Europe since World War II, greatly deceived, very anti-German. Germans have been blamed for all kinds of terrible atrocities they didn't commit.
Is the Morgenthau a son or a relation?
Yes, he's the
of
son.
the
Robert Morgenthau is the son of Henry Morgenthau. Exactly. And
the one who wrote a book said Germany must die.
Germany must perish, right. And yes, and you see, that is, prior to the ascendance of the internet, we were really limited to the opinions coming from published authors and the controlled mainstream media. Now the mainstream media in this country is nosedived completely. I mean, it's worthless. TV in this country is worthless. The newspapers aren't much better. But on the internet, we're able to communicate and share information in a way we weren't able to before. And I think that there is a growing awareness that our revolution in this country is basically primarily a spiritual one. We are, hopefully, awareness will increase about the deception, and it has already. Because like in 2005, when I was writing about false flag terrorism stuff, most people didn't understand what I was talking about.
I didn't.
And when I was talking about, my basic presentation has not changed much since 2000. I mean, since it's developed over the years. But I was talking about these things in 2001, 2002 already. But I was persona non grata in the 9/11 Truth Movement because it's controlled. There's gatekeepers, people who don't want to hear about Israeli involvement. They just don't want to hear it. It's blocked. In the same way, the peace movement is controlled. And so, but now, there are many, many people who understand this. And as this awareness increases, it's going to lead to almost a change in consciousness. It has led to a change in consciousness. People are aware of these things now. So I'm hoping that the revolution that happens in this country will be a non-violent one, that we will reach a critical mass of people in this country, 5, 6, 7%, who understand this and who are influential and people of means and people who have power, and that will put these characters out of business. But there have to be radical changes in this country. Radical.
Two quick
Same like in Germany. Go
Two
ahead.
quick follow-ups on that,
Please.
The first would be, since it's clear that both political parties' main luminaries who are offered to the American people are as completely in the pocket, regardless of position, is it possible that Vladimir Putin holds the fate of the world in his hands? Or does it simply mean that the fact that he hasn't revealed the truth, which he must know, means he's in the pocket just as much, and there is no independent leadership of any country anywhere in the world who is not in the pocket, so that it will have to require someone from a lower level to do the classic colonel's coup kind of thing to make something happen?
Yeah.
Are we looking at a world where no one at the level of leadership has the capability or the will or the desire or the freedom to expose the truth?
Yeah, I think that you're right about that, because like Putin and the Russians, I mean, I wanted to visit them before I came on this trip, and I asked them to invite me to come to Moscow, because I said, well, I'm speaking in America, and I want to have the real goods from you about what I'm going to talk about, because right now Russian and American relations are very bad, and it could lead to war if it's still in the hands of those Nulans and Kagans. They will take us to war. But I didn't get that invitation, and for 14 years we've seen that the Russians have not come forth with 9/11 truth in any meaningful way. Nobody has. So I would have to agree with your analysis that even Putin he's not just there probably he has reasons why he cannot do that, and so to some degree, as you said, these people all have some baggage or some, but not all leaders in the world are the same. It's like the American leadership is a circus in this country. That's all I can call it, a circus. But these candidates, it's gotten ridiculous. But there are other countries where there is some degree of hope in that these people are more independent. But they are not going to solve 9/11 for us. Even Putin won't do it. It's our, we can't give this responsibility, this obligation to anybody else. We have to do it ourselves. It's really something we have to do. And it means that the American people have to get much more engaged in our political process. For too long, we've treated our democratic state, our democratic obligations as like a spectator sport, which is what they make it on TV. We have to get much more involved. And one thing you can do, one thing I think is really important to do, is to build local groups. Have local groups and share the information and develop your political awareness and your political obligations, responsibility locally. That's because I don't want to do a bloody revolution in this country too, because any revolution that comes, there's always a very good chance that you'll wind up with a much worse result than you already have. And I believe that what we need in this country is a restoration of our fundamental values, fundamental constitutional values. That's what we need. Next question?
Yeah.
Sir.
I once read that you said your family was descended from Bollyn in England. Aren't you worried that you were going to get your head chopped? Saying all this stuff.
Or is
it possible that people responsible are actually very proud of what they did, and they're kind of like tuning in because that's the one thing they're missing. They're missing that feeling of, that's what I did.
You're right. You're right. The comments of Netanyahu indicate that kind of thing. Where he spoke in Hebrew at Bar-Ilan University. It was printed in Hebrew, and Haaretz reported it. Where he's saying, look, he's basically saying, look, I did it for you guys. I did this for Israel. We are benefiting from one thing, and that is the American struggle in Iraq, the attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And he's like saying, That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to assuage his conscience too. But these people, these psychopaths that committed 9/11, they have a total different consciousness than we have. Total conscience. They're totally different. And they see their tribal identity as being as supreme. They're Jewish supremacists, basically. And that's the structure of Israel today. I've lived in Israel for a long time, and it's a nation where there's this basic underlying concept of Jewish supremacism, which is a flawed notion and a dangerous one.
So they don't feel sufficiently threatened by them. There's no extradition treaty from Israel.
Right.
They feel very, very safe there.
Right.
So you go around, exposing things,
Right.
they're going to say, well, we're tuning in, see what it's got to say.
Right.
See how close he's getting.
Right.
I mean, that might be, because, obviously, you could eventually cause a lot of trouble for people down the road.
But Anne Boleyn's crime was that she supported the translation of the Bible into English. The church, the Roman Church, owned 34% of English real estate prior to Henry VIII.
Well, so it's in the blood, all this exposing.
Well, I don't know. But of course, the Boleyns, many of them died, and some of them, one branch left the country, and my Boleyns came to America from Switzerland. So apparently they went there and worked on that research to find out. But she supported the idea that the people of England deserved to have the scripture in their language and not listen in Latin and not understand anything. So she, for 500 years, the people of England only had Latin Mass and Latin scripture. So it's the same idea, though, trying to bring information, critical information is essential for people to the people. I agree that there's a little similarity there. Your question, sir.
Well, just a little bit of follow-up to the other gentleman's point. We have such spectacular levels of corruption here in the United States. Both houses of Congress, AIPAC has bought off large swaths of the members, both parties in both houses of Congress. Our judiciary, much corruption. Our media, self-evidently corrupt and bought off. Even the churches, Christian Zionism, that's perhaps a digression from our talk today, but if you go into the southeast of our country, enormous support for Israel. It's taught on Sunday morning to them.
Right.
Anyway, I suppose my point is, could any of these people really be brought to justice in the current structures of the country? I know if this type of information was presented to previous generations of Americans, everyone would be off their duff and demanding justice.
Right.
And today, I just sense that, well, I think what you're doing is absolutely important. We have to get the truth out, and that can lead to some popular movements. But I can never see people like Silverstein and Rumsfeld and Cheney ever being brought to justice, as well as the Israeli leaders. And the only thing I can think of that would allow me to sleep at night is if we could get a mass movement where they know that we know. In other words, that even though they'll never be in a docket and called into account, at least they'll know that a goodly portion of the population knows of the deception.
Right.
And that, and that will reside in historical memory.
They'll account for it.
It's
not in this world.
It's not in this world.
They feel very confident, obviously. People like Chertoff and Hellerstein and Bush, they all feel very comfortable. And it's because they are members of secret societies that dominate the government. They all belong to these secret groups and these combinations, like the Mormons would say, secret combinations of men, and they feel invulnerable. And that would change, of course, overnight if there were a revolution in this country. If there were a righteous revolution and we started rounding up these characters, which is really what has to happen. They have to be rounded up, and we have to have a huge, like 9/11 Inquisition, in which all of the characters that I presented here and others who are part of the deception, part of the cover-up, part of the crime, are treated as criminals and taken to places like Guantanamo. No, I mean, really, if they approved of the method of torture and of interrogation, enhanced interrogation, the people who deserve to be interrogated with enhanced methods are these characters.
Absolutely.
George Bush is down in Texas painting watercolors like a 12-year-old. And Cheney, I don't know what he's doing. Ashcroft is very hard to find. He's working for the Israelis. the whole crew. And you need to start with the people who are involved in the cover-up, because the cover-up is a crime. Covering up a crime like this is a cover-up, is a crime itself. But it needs to be a whole systematic purge. And it has to be done quickly. I mean, you have to grab them all before they get to the airport.
But with Congress largely under the Israeli thumb, what is the mechanism? I mean, what tribunal could? I mean, obviously you can't have a congressional investigation.
No, what I'm saying if there were a revolution, we would
If
have.
there were a revolution,
If there were,
absolutely.
without that radical sea change, without that radical change in power, they're not very worried. They're not very worried. So, to prevent this nation from going into even worse conditions with a faulty revolution, I say that the change has to be a spiritual change. It has to be a change in consciousness on a large scale. And that could happen very quickly if, for example, somebody like the Pope or Pink Floyd or somebody with a lot of influence were to say, we've been lied to by 9/11. Somebody with a lot of stature would say that. You would get thousands of people instantly understanding that and taking action. But I've seen that there's a lot more support for 9/11 truth now in this country than there was 10 years ago. Even though you would think that it would be the other way around. But no, it's changing. But I think that the change, in order to be positive change, it has to be nonviolent. I hope that it should be like that. Henry?
What about the Sampson option? Is that also a possibility for these criminals that they could throw us into World War III to avoid?
The Sampson option is also what the Sampson option is like the Israeli option when they are feeling surrounded, they push down the whole thing and bring the whole thing down on themselves, like Samson did. One thing that could happen, for example, would be we don't know what's going to happen. There's unknown unknowns, like Rumsfeld said. One thing could happen, there could be a big change a sea change in Israel. Israel is in a precarious position socially in many ways. And the Middle East is like a California forest fire. And a change in wind or a change in temperature could change things drastically overnight. And something could happen in Israel, something could happen in the Middle East, that something could happen. Revelations could happen. The state of Israel could cease to exist. That could happen. I mean, these things are not, Israel is in as I said, precarious position. Anything can happen. You just don't know. And so if that were to happen, it might not be at all the Samson option that Israel pushes down and the whole world falls apart. It could be that Israel simply ceases to exist. And information comes flushing out of all these crimes that they've been involved in. One of the quotations I have in this book, I have little quotations in front, little bits of information and quotations before each chapter. And one of them is from a man named Raphael Eitan. This is the one that was the chief of staff of Israel forces. And he's talking about Colombia. He's talking about the drug trade with Colombia, which is a big part of the whole story as well. And he's